The music stopped the moment Damon Ashford raised his hand. Lyra Vance stood in the center of the great hall, wearing a white dress stitched with silver thread, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure the whole kingdom could hear it. Hundreds of eyes were on her, alphas, betas, omegas, all dressed in their finest clothes, all waiting for the moment their king would claim his mate in front of the entire pack. She had waited for this night since she was 16 years old. Damon stood a few steps away from her, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark eyes usually warm whenever he looked at her. Tonight they were cold, distant, like he was looking through her instead of at her. "Damon," she whispered, taking a small step forward. "It's time." He did not move toward her. Instead, he turned to face the crowd, his jaw tight, his shoulders squared like a man preparing for battle. "I cannot bond with Lyra Vance," he said, his voice carrying across the silent hall. For one terrible second, nobody breathed. Lyra felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. She must have heard him wrong. There was no way the man she loved, the man who had whispered promises to her under moonlight for 2 years, was standing in front of the entire kingdom and rejecting her. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Damon finally looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes was worse than anger. It was pity. "I need a mate strong enough to stand beside a king," he said. "Someone who can lead armies. Someone whose bloodline can protect this pack for generations. You are a good Omega, Lyra, but you are not what this kingdom needs." A woman stepped out from the crowd, wearing deep red, her posture proud and confident. Vivian Cross, the daughter of the Alpha of the Ironwood Pack, known across the land for her strength in battle. Lyra had heard rumors about her before, but she never believed Damon would choose politics over the bond they had built together. "I have chosen Vivian as my mate," Damon announced. "The bonding ceremony will happen tonight." The hall erupted into whispers. Some pack members looked at Lyra with sympathy. Others simply looked away, embarrassed for her, as if her humiliation was contagious, and they did not want to catch it. Lyra could not move. She could not speak. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to run, but her legs would not obey. She stood there, frozen, as the man she had given her heart to turned his back on her in front of everyone she had ever known. What none of them knew, what Damon himself did not seem to remember in that moment, was that Lyra was not simply his childhood friend, or his secret companion. She was already bonded to him. 3 months earlier, on a quiet night beneath the old oak tree at the edge of the territory, Damon had marked her. It had been a private moment, just the two of them. No witnesses, no ceremony, only a promise, whispered between two people who believed they would spend their lives together. He had told her that the formal ceremony would come later, that he needed time to convince the council that their bond was already real, even if the world did not know it yet. Lyra had believed him completely. Now she understood. He had used that private moment to satisfy his own wolf, his own need for a mate, while planning all along to choose someone else once the political pressure came. The mark on her neck, hidden beneath her collar, was not a promise. It was a lie, with teeth. And a rejection after a mark had already been placed was not simply painful, it was dangerous. Every Omega knew the old stories, the whispered warnings passed down through generations. A bond broken after marking did not simply hurt the heart. It attacked the body itself, poisoning the Omegas slowly from the inside, weakening them until their wolf could no longer hold on. Lyra pressed her hand against her collar without thinking, feeling the mark burn beneath her fingers. "Lyra." A gentle hand touched her shoulder. It was Ruby Sinclair, her closest friend since childhood, her eyes wide with concern. "Lyra, you need to sit down. You've gone pale." "I need to leave," Lyra said quietly. "Let me walk you out." "No." Lyra shook her head, forcing herself to stand straighter, refusing to let the entire hall watch her collapse. "I can walk myself." She turned and walked toward the doors of the great hall, each step feeling heavier than the last. Behind her, she could hear the musicians beginning to play again, the celebration continuing as if nothing had happened, as if she had not just been erased from the future she thought she was building. Vivian's laughter rang out behind her, sharp and triumphant. Lyra did not look back. By the time she reached the gardens outside the hall, her whole body was trembling. The night air was cold against her skin, but the fire beneath her collar felt like it was spreading, crawling up her neck and down into her chest. She pressed her back against a stone wall and slid down until she was sitting on the cold ground, her white dress pooling around her like spilled milk. She had given him everything, her trust, her loyalty, her future, and he had thrown it away in front of the entire kingdom without a second thought. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Lyra looked up to see an older woman approaching, wrapped in a gray shawl, her silver hair pulled back into a tight knot. It was Elena Whitmore, the pack healer, a woman known throughout the territory for her knowledge of bonds and blood and the strange connection between wolves and their mates. "I'm fine," Lyra said automatically, the lie slipping out before she could stop it. Elena crouched down in front of her, studying Lyra's face with sharp, careful eyes. "You were marked before tonight, weren't you?" Lyra's breath caught. "How did you know?" "I can sense it on you. A completed mark, freshly broken." Elena's expression softened with something close to sorrow. "Child, you need to come with me right now. This cannot wait until morning." "What's happening to me?" Lyra asked, her voice small. "The bond is turning against you," Elena said gently. "It happens rarely, because most alphas are careful never to mark an omega unless they intend to complete the bond properly. But when a mark is left broken, when the promise behind it is shattered, the bond does not simply fade away quietly. It resists. And when it resists inside a body that has been abandoned, the results can be very serious." Lyra stared at the healer, trying to process what she was hearing. She had come to the garden seeking a quiet place to grieve a broken heart. Now she was being told her health itself was under threat. "Is there a cure?" Lyra asked. Elena hesitated, and that hesitation frightened Lyra more than anything else that had happened that night. "There is one option," Elena finally said. "It is rarely used by most healers because of what it costs, but it is the only way I know to keep you safe." "Tell me," Lyra said. "Whatever it is, tell me." Elena reached out and took Lyra's cold hands in her own weathered ones. "There is a ritual, old and rarely spoken of, that can separate an omega from a broken bond by removing the memories connected to it. Not just the memory of the mark itself, but every memory tied to the alpha who placed it. The mind forgets him completely, and without those memories to hold on to, the bond loses its hold on the body." Lyra felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You mean I would forget him, forget Damon entirely?" "Not only him," Elena said carefully. "Any memory connected to him, no matter how small, would be at risk. The mind is not a tool that can be shaped with perfect precision. We cannot promise you would keep every other memory untouched. Some small pieces of your own life, moments that happen to overlap with him, might be lost as well." Lyra thought of the years she had spent loving Damon in secret, the nights they had spent talking beneath the stars. The way he used to laugh before he became king, back when he was just a boy who snuck out of the castle to spend time with a girl from a minor pack. The first time he had told her he loved her, his voice shaking with a nervousness she had never seen from him again. If she chose this ritual, all of it would disappear. Not just the pain of tonight, but every good moment that came before it. "There has to be another way," Lyra said, though even as she spoke, she could feel a strange heaviness pressing into her chest, like the bond itself was reminding her of its presence. "If there were another way, I would tell you," Elena said. "I have searched for one every single time I have had to offer this choice to someone. There is no other cure. Time will not heal this. Distance will not heal this. Only forgetting can help you." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling tears slide down her cheeks for the first time that night. She thought about her mother, who had passed away when Lyra was young, and the way she used to say that survival sometimes demanded sacrifices nobody should have to make. She thought about her own dreams, the life she had imagined building beside Damon, a life that no longer existed even before tonight, because it had all been built on a lie. "If I do this," Lyra said slowly, "will he know? Will Damon ever find out what I chose to do?" "No," Elena said. "The ritual does not announce itself. To the rest of the world, it will simply look as though you left quietly, after being rejected. No one but the two of us needs to know the truth." Lyra opened her eyes and looked up at the stars scattered across the black sky, the same stars she used to point out to Damon when they were young and foolish and believed nothing could ever come between them. She thought about growing weaker in a garden behind a castle that was no longer her home, weighed down by a promise that had never been real. She thought about living, even if living meant becoming a stranger to her own past. "I want to survive," Lyra finally said, her voice steady, despite the tears still falling. "Whatever it costs, I want to survive." Elena squeezed her hands gently. "Then we do not have much time. The longer we wait, the more the bond settles into you, and the harder the ritual becomes to perform safely. We should begin tonight." Lyra nodded, though her whole body felt numb. She let Elena help her to her feet, and together they walked away from the castle, away from the music still drifting faintly through the night air, away from the life Lyra had spent years building around a man who had never truly chosen her. As they reached the edge of the forest, Lyra paused and looked back one final time at the glowing windows of the great hall, where somewhere inside, Damon was likely holding Vivian's hand, beginning a bond he believed would secure his kingdom's future. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to feel anger burning through her veins alongside the pain. But mostly, in that final moment before she turned away for good, she simply felt sadness. Sadness for the girl who had believed so completely in a love that had never truly belonged to her. "Are you ready?" Elena asked softly. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the cold night air fill her lungs one last time, as the person who remembered loving Damon Ashford. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready to forget him." She did not look back again. Behind her, the castle lights grew smaller and smaller, until the forest swallowed them whole, and Lyra Vance walked forward into a new life that would soon become the only truth she knew. Elena led her through winding forest paths that Lyra had never walked before, deeper into territory that belonged to no pack, land left wild and untouched because of old stories about the strange things that lived there. After nearly an hour of walking, they reached a small stone cottage hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines, smoke curling gently from its chimney. "This is where I do my most difficult work," Elena said, pushing open the wooden door, away from prying eyes. Inside, the cottage was warm and cluttered with shelves of dried herbs, glass jars filled with unfamiliar liquids, and old books stacked in uneven towers. A single wooden table sat in the center of the room, and Elena gestured for Lyra to sit. "Before we begin, I need you to understand something important," Elena said, pulling a chair across from her. "This ritual cannot be reversed. Once your memories of Damon Ashford are gone, they will not come back through ordinary means. Not through seeing him again. Not through hearing his name. Not through anything short of another kind of magic entirely, and even that would be extremely rare and dangerous to attempt." "I understand," Lyra said. "You may still feel things," Elena continued. "Echoes of the bond can remain in the body, even after the mind forgets its source. You might feel unexplained pain during certain moons. You might feel drawn to certain places without knowing why. These are simply the last threads of a connection your mind will no longer remember creating." Lyra nodded slowly, trying to absorb everything Elena was telling her. "One more thing," Elena said, her voice softening. "After tonight, you will believe a story. That you were rejected by your pack for being unworthy. That you chose to leave and start a new life elsewhere. This will feel true to you, because in a sense, it will replace the truth you are giving up. I will make sure you have somewhere safe to go. Papers explaining a new identity if needed. Enough coin to survive until you find your footing." "You've done this before," Lyra realized. "A few times," Elena admitted. "Never easily. Never without grief of my own, watching someone erase a piece of themselves to survive. But I have never regretted helping someone choose life over a slow, painful ending." Elena stood and moved toward one of her shelves, retrieving a small clay bowl and a collection of dried leaves that smelled faintly of lavender and something sharper underneath, something Lyra could not identify. "Drink this first," Elena said, mixing the leaves with warm water and handing the bowl to Lyra. "It will help calm your body before we begin the deeper part of the ritual." Lyra took the bowl with trembling hands and drank, the liquid bitter and warm sliding down her throat. Almost immediately, she felt a strange heaviness settle over her limbs, not unpleasant, simply distant, like she was slowly sinking into a warm bath. "Close your eyes," Elena instructed gently, "and think of him. Just this once. Allow yourself to remember everything, fully and completely. One last time. It will make the release easier. Lyra closed her eyes, and despite everything, despite the pain and the humiliation, she let herself remember. She remembered being 14 years old, watching Daemon train in the courtyard from a distance, too shy to speak to the future king. She remembered him approaching her first, offering a crooked, boyish smile, asking why she always sat alone. She remembered years of stolen moments, quiet conversations beneath old trees, the first time his hand found hers and neither of them pulled away. She remembered the night beneath the oak tree, his voice trembling as he told her she was the only one he had ever wanted. The warmth of his mark settling into her skin like a promise carved in flesh. Tears slipped from beneath her closed eyelids, but she did not stop remembering. She remembered laughing until her stomach hurt over some foolish joke he had made. She remembered comforting him after his father passed away, holding him while he cried, in a way he never allowed anyone else to witness. She remembered believing, with her whole heart, that whatever difficulties came, they would face them together. "That's enough," Elena said softly, noticing the tears streaming steadily down Lyra's face. "You've remembered enough. Now it's time to let go." Elena placed both hands gently on either side of Lyra's face, her fingers warm despite the coolness of the cottage air. "This will feel strange," Elena warned, "like falling asleep and waking up as someone slightly different. Trust the process. Trust that you are choosing to live." Lyra nodded, unable to speak through her tears. "Goodbye, Daemon," she whispered, so quietly that even she barely heard the words. "I loved you. I hope somewhere, in some small way, you understand what this cost me." Elena began to chant softly in a language Lyra did not recognize, ancient and rhythmic, the words wrapping around the room like a gentle wind. Lyra felt a strange pulling sensation behind her eyes, gentle at first, then growing stronger, like threads being carefully pulled loose from fabric. Images began to blur together in her mind. The oak tree, his smile, his voice, his mark burning into her skin, all of it swirling faster and faster, until she could no longer separate one memory from another. "Let go," Elena's voice echoed, distant now, like it was coming from somewhere far away. Let go, and live. The last thing Lyra felt, before darkness swallowed her completely, was a strange, quiet peace, as though some enormous weight she had been carrying, without realizing it was finally, gently, being lifted away. When Lyra opened her eyes again, morning light was filtering through the cottage window, warm and golden across the wooden floor. She sat up slowly, blinking against the brightness, feeling strangely light, like she had just woken from an unusually deep and dreamless sleep. "Good morning," Elena said, sitting nearby with a cup of tea in her hands, watching her carefully. "Good morning," Lyra replied, her voice a little rough. "I'm sorry. Have we met before? I don't quite remember how I ended up here." Elena's expression flickered with something like sorrow, quickly hidden behind a gentle smile. "We have met, yes. I'm a healer. You came to me after some difficulties with your pack. Do you remember that much?" Lyra frowned, trying to piece together fragments of memory. There was something about a rejection, about being told she was not good enough, about deciding to leave and build a new life somewhere far away. The details felt distant and slightly blurry, like trying to recall a dream hours after waking. "I remember leaving my pack," Lyra said slowly. "I remember feeling like I didn't belong there anymore. Is that right?" "That's right," Elena said gently. "You made a brave choice, leaving everything behind to start fresh. Not everyone has the strength to do that." Lyra nodded, accepting this explanation because it felt true, even if the specific memories were hazy. She noticed a strange tenderness beneath her collar and reached up to touch her neck, finding smooth, unmarked skin. "You should rest a little longer," Elena said. "And when you're ready, I know of a healer's household in a distant territory that could use an apprentice. It would be a good place for you to begin again." "Thank you," Lyra said, and she meant it, even though she could not fully explain the depth of gratitude she felt toward this woman she barely remembered meeting. Outside the cottage window, birds sang cheerfully in the morning air, and Lyra Vance took a deep breath, feeling strangely hopeful despite not fully understanding why the past felt like such an unfamiliar country. She did not know that somewhere behind her, in a castle she barely remembered, a king was about to discover that the bond he had never truly acknowledged had gone permanently, unexplainably silent. And she did not know that this silence would haunt him for years to come. 3 days after the rejection ceremony, Damon Ashford sat alone in his private study, staring at a letter he had not yet found the courage to open. The bonding with Vivian Cross had gone exactly as planned. The alliance between his kingdom and the Ironwood Pack was now secure, strengthened by a mark placed on her neck in front of witnesses from both territories. His advisors had praised him for making a difficult but necessary decision. His father, had he still been alive, would have approved of the strategic wisdom behind the choice. So why did it feel like something inside him had died the moment he completed that bond? Damon rubbed his chest absently, a strange hollow ache settling beneath his ribs that had not existed before the ceremony with Vivian. He told himself it was simply stress, the weight of leadership, the exhaustion of managing a kingdom's expectations. But deep down, in the part of himself connected to his wolf, something felt wrong, in a way he could not name. His wolf had gone quiet. Not simply calm, the way it usually settled after a difficult decision, but truly silent, like a candle that had been snuffed out entirely. Damon had tried reaching for it during his morning run through the training grounds, and found nothing there but empty space where a familiar presence used to be. A knock sounded at his study door. "Enter," Damon called. Caleb Hart, his most trusted advisor and closest friend since childhood, stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. Caleb's expression was carefully neutral, the kind of expression he wore when he had something difficult to say. "You wanted an update on the northern border patrols," Caleb said. "That's not why you're really here," Damon said, setting down the unopened letter. "Say what you came to say." Caleb hesitated, then crossed the room and sat in the chair across from Damon's desk. "The pack is talking. About you. About how you've seemed different since the ceremony." "Different how?" "Quieter. Distant. Some of the older wolves are whispering that your wolf hasn't fully accepted the bond with Vivian." Caleb studied Damon's face carefully. "Is there truth to that?" Damon was quiet for a long moment, unsure how to explain something he barely understood himself. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "Something feels wrong, Caleb. Since the ceremony, I can't feel my wolf the way I used to. It's like part of me has simply gone silent." "That's not normal for a completed bond," Caleb said carefully. "I know that," Damon snapped, more sharply than he intended. He took a breath, forcing himself to calm down. "I'm sorry. I don't understand what's happening to me." Caleb studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "Damon, can I ask you something? And you promise not to get angry?" "Ask." "Before the ceremony, when you made the announcement rejecting Lyra Vance, did you notice anything unusual about her reaction? Anything beyond normal heartbreak?" Damon frowned, trying to recall that night, though the memory felt strangely fuzzy, like trying to remember something through fog. She looked shocked, devastated, honestly. "I remember feeling terrible about it, but I told myself it was necessary for the kingdom's future." "Where is she now?" Caleb asked. "I don't know," Damon admitted. "She left the territory sometime after the ceremony. I heard she went to stay with distant relatives, or perhaps started fresh somewhere new. I never followed up." Caleb's expression tightened slightly. "Doesn't that seem strange to you, that you never followed up? You two were close for years, Damon. Practically inseparable since childhood, from what I remember." "We were friends," Damon said, though even as he spoke the words, something about them felt incomplete, like describing only a fraction of a larger truth he could not quite access. "Just friends?" Caleb pressed gently. "What are you suggesting?" Damon asked, irritation creeping into his voice. "I'm not suggesting anything," Caleb said carefully. "I'm simply noting that your wolf went silent immediately after you completed a bond with someone else, right after rejecting someone you spent years close to. That timing seems significant." Damon opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again, uncertain what to say. Caleb's words stirred something uncomfortable in him, a nagging sensation that he was missing an important piece of a puzzle he did not fully understand. "I need some air," Damon said abruptly, standing from his desk. He left the study and made his way through the castle halls, ignoring the greetings of passing pack members, his mind consumed with unwelcome thoughts. He walked without a clear destination, his feet eventually carrying him outside to the castle gardens, the same gardens where, unknown to him, Lyra had collapsed in grief just days earlier. Damon stopped near a stone wall, breathing in the cool afternoon air, trying to calm the strange restlessness building inside him. Vivian found him there 20 minutes later, her expression sharp with irritation. "You missed the afternoon council meeting," she said, crossing her arms. "I needed a moment," Damon replied. "You've needed a great many moments lately," Vivian said, her tone cooling further. "Our bond was supposed to strengthen you, Damon. Strengthen this kingdom. Instead, you've been distracted and distant since the ceremony. People are starting to notice." "I'm aware," Damon said tightly. Vivian studied him for a moment, something calculating flickering behind her eyes. "Is this about the Omega girl, the one you rejected?" Damon's head snapped up. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you say her name in your sleep," Vivian said flatly. "Lyra, over and over, like you're searching for something you lost." Damon stared at her, a cold, uncomfortable feeling spreading through his chest. He had no memory of dreaming about Lyra, no conscious awareness of thinking about her beyond the guilt he felt for how their friendship had ended, but hearing that his sleeping mind was calling out her name repeatedly sent an unsettling chill through him. "I don't know what that means," Damon said honestly. "Figure it out," Vivian said coldly. "Because I did not agree to bond with a king whose heart belongs somewhere else. Fix whatever is wrong with you, Damon, before it becomes a problem for both our territories." She turned and walked away without waiting for a response, leaving Damon alone in the garden with his thoughts. That night, Damon dreamed of the oak tree at the edge of his territory, though he could not explain why his mind had conjured such a specific, vivid image. In the dream, he stood beneath its branches, waiting for someone, though the identity of that someone remained frustratingly out of reach, like a face obscured by shadow. He woke before dawn, his heart racing, a phantom ache pulsing beneath his ribs, exactly where he had felt the hollow emptiness since the ceremony with Vivian. Unable to fall back asleep, Damon dressed quietly and left the castle, walking through the quiet, moonlit forest paths until, almost without realizing his intention, he found himself standing beneath the very oak tree from his dream. He stared up at its wide branches, a strange, unexplainable sense of loss washing over him, though he could not name what exactly he felt he had lost. "Why does this place feel important?" he murmured to himself, running a hand along the tree's rough bark. There was no answer, only the quiet rustling of leaves in the night breeze, and the persistent, hollow ache in his chest that refused to fade, no matter how many days passed since the ceremony that was supposed to complete him. Weeks turned into a month, and Damon's condition did not improve. His wolf remained silent. His temper, usually carefully controlled, began flaring unpredictably, small frustrations sending him into rare, sharp bursts of anger he immediately regretted. His advisors grew concerned. Vivian grew colder, spending increasing amounts of time away from the castle, tending to matters in her home territory, rather than remaining beside a mate who seemed unable to fully connect with her. Caleb remained the only person who continued gently pressing Damon to investigate what was truly happening. "You need answers," Caleb said one evening, finding Damon once again standing in the training grounds, long after everyone else had retired for the night. "This isn't sustainable, Damon. The kingdom needs a stable king, and right now, you are anything but stable." "I don't know where to look for answers," Damon admitted, frustration heavy in his voice. "I feel like I'm missing something obvious, some piece of the puzzle sitting right in front of me, but I cannot see it clearly." "Then let's start somewhere simple," Caleb suggested. "Let's find out what actually happened to Lyra Vance after she left. Not because I think it will solve everything, but because it's the one loose thread neither of us has properly examined." Damon considered this for a long moment, the hollow ache in his chest pulsing faintly at the mention of her name, as though something deep inside him recognized it as important, even while his conscious mind remained uncertain why. "All right," Damon finally said. "Let's find her." He did not yet understand why this decision felt like the first genuinely right choice he had made in weeks. He only knew that for the first time since the ceremony, the hollow emptiness in his chest felt, however slightly, less unbearable. It would take months before Damon understood the true significance of that choice. Months before the investigation, Caleb began that night would uncover a truth so devastating, it would shatter every assumption Damon had built his life around. But that night, standing beneath moonlight, in the training grounds of a kingdom he had sacrificed everything to protect, Damon Ashford simply felt, for reasons he could not explain, that he was finally moving towards something important. Somewhere far away, in a territory she had never visited before, Lyra Vance was beginning her first day as a healer's apprentice, completely unaware that the man whose name she no longer remembered had just taken the first step toward finding her again. The town of Hollow Creek smelled like rain and fresh bread, a small settlement nestled between rolling hills far from any kingdom's central territory, populated by wolves who had chosen to live quiet, unremarkable lives away from politics and packs. Lyra loved it immediately. She stood outside a modest wooden house with green shutters, a small sign hanging above the door that read, "Fielding Healing House," gripping the strap of her travel bag with nervous hands. Elena had given her a letter of introduction, along with enough coin to survive several months if needed, and clear directions to find Nora Fielding, a healer known for taking in apprentices who needed a fresh start. Lyra knocked twice, and moments later, the door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, silver streaking through dark hair pulled into a practical braid, sharp eyes softened by evident kindness. "You must be Lyra," the woman said warmly. "Elena wrote to me." Come in. You look exhausted from your journey." "Thank you for taking me in, Mrs. Fielding," Lyra said, stepping inside the warm, herb-scented house. "Please, call me Nora. Mrs. Fielding makes me sound far older than I actually am." Nora led her through a small hallway into a cozy kitchen, gesturing for Lyra to sit at a wooden table while she prepared tea. "Elena tells me you have some experience with basic herbal remedies." "A little," Lyra said, though even as she spoke, she realized she could not quite recall where or when she had learned such skills. The knowledge simply felt present in her mind, practical and familiar, without a clear memory attached to its origin. Good. We'll build from there." Nora set 2 cups of tea on the table and sat across from Lyra, studying her with careful, assessing eyes. "Elena mentioned you went through some difficulties before coming here. You don't have to share details if you're not comfortable, but I want you to know this house is a safe place. No judgment here." "I appreciate that," Lyra said softly, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Honestly, some of it feels a bit unclear to me now. I remember leaving my pack, feeling like I didn't belong there, but the specific reasons feel hazy, like trying to remember a dream." Nora's expression flickered with something Lyra could not quite identify, gone too quickly to name. "Sometimes the mind protects us by softening painful memories," Nora said gently. "There's no shame in that. What matters now is building something new." Lyra nodded, grateful for the kindness in Nora's voice, and something in her chest, some tight, anxious knot she had carried without fully realizing it, loosened slightly. Over the following weeks, Lyra settled into a comfortable rhythm at the healing house. Nora taught her to identify medicinal herbs growing wild in the surrounding hills, how to prepare remedies for common ailments, how to set broken bones and stitch wounds with steady, careful hands. Lyra proved a quick learner, absorbing knowledge with an eagerness that clearly pleased her new mentor. She also made a fast friend in a young woman named Iris Bellamy, who ran the town's small bakery and had a habit of bringing fresh bread to the healing house whenever she stopped by for minor treatments or simply to chat. "You're settling in well," Iris observed one afternoon, sitting on the healing house porch while Lyra sorted dried herbs into labeled jars. "Hollow Creek can be a hard place for newcomers to feel at home, but you seem to fit right in." "It feels right here," Lyra admitted, smiling faintly. "Peaceful. I don't know exactly what I left behind, but whatever it was, I don't think I miss it." "Good," Iris said. "You deserve peace." Despite the genuine happiness Lyra found in her new life, strange things occasionally happened that she could not fully explain. Sometimes, without warning, a sharp ache would bloom beneath her collarbone, sudden and intense, then fade just as quickly as it arrived. Nora had examined her carefully after the first occurrence, checking for any physical cause, but found nothing wrong. "Perhaps it's simply stress catching up with your body," Nora suggested, though her expression carried a subtle uncertainty that made Lyra wonder if her mentor suspected something more. The pain grew noticeably worse during the full moon. On the first full moon after her arrival in Hollow Creek, Lyra woke in the middle of the night gasping, her entire body aching with a deep, unexplainable heaviness, as though something vital had been pulled painfully far away from where it belonged. She sat up in bed, pressing a trembling hand against her chest, tears springing unbidden to her eyes despite feeling no clear reason for sadness. The sensation passed by morning, leaving her exhausted and confused, but otherwise fine. "You look pale," Nora observed the next day, studying Lyra with obvious concern. "Rough night?" "I had trouble sleeping," Lyra said, which felt truer than trying to explain the strange, wordless grief that had gripped her during the night. "I'm sure it was nothing." Nora did not look convinced, but she did not press further, simply nodding and returning to her work, though Lyra occasionally caught her mentor watching her with a thoughtful, careful expression over the following days. Months passed this way, Lyra building a genuinely happy life in Hollow Creek, punctuated by these occasional strange episodes of unexplained pain, always worse during the full moon, always fading by morning into something she could push aside and forget about until the next occurrence. She had, without realizing it, developed several small habits that seemed to soothe the aching sensation when it appeared. She often found herself walking toward the eastern edge of town during difficult nights, drawn toward a particular grove of old oak trees for reasons she could not explain, sitting beneath their branches until the strange, heavy sadness gradually eased. "You spend a lot of time out by those trees," Iris commented one evening, joining Lyra on one such walk, concern evident in her voice. "Is everything all right?" "I don't really know how to explain it," Lyra admitted, staring up at the moonlit branches above them. "Something about this spot just feels peaceful, familiar, somehow, even though I know I've never been here before arriving in Hollow Creek. Maybe it reminds you of somewhere from your old life," Iris suggested gently, "even if you don't remember the specific memory." Lyra considered this possibility, turning it over in her mind. It made a strange kind of sense, though it also stirred an uncomfortable, unsettled feeling in her chest, like brushing against the edge of something important she could not quite grasp. "Maybe," she said quietly. "I suppose some things stay with us, even when the details fade away." As the months continued passing, Lyra grew more confident in her healing skills, eventually assisting Nora with increasingly complex cases, earning genuine respect from the wider Hollow Creek community. She built friendships, developed routines, and slowly constructed a version of herself that felt authentic and complete, even without full access to the years that had shaped who she used to be. She rarely thought about her old life anymore, the hazy, distant memories of her original pack fading further into vague, unimportant background noise compared to the vivid, meaningful present she was building in Hollow Creek. But the pain during full moons never fully disappeared, no matter how much time passed. And sometimes, in quiet, unguarded moments, Lyra caught herself staring toward the horizon, toward some distant point she could not name, feeling an inexplicable pull she had long since stopped trying to understand. She did not know, could not know, that hundreds of miles away, a king was slowly piecing together a trail of clues that would eventually lead him directly to her doorstep. She did not know that the peaceful life she had built in Hollow Creek existed on borrowed time, waiting for a reunion neither of them could yet imagine, but that fate seemed determined to bring about, regardless of the distance, the forgotten memories, or the years that had passed since a broken promise beneath an oak tree had nearly cost her everything. One evening, nearly a year after her arrival, Nora found Lyra sitting alone on the Healing House porch, staring thoughtfully at the stars scattered across the clear night sky. "Penny for your thoughts," Nora said, settling into the chair beside her with a soft creak of old wood. "I was just thinking about how strange it is," Lyra said slowly, "to feel completely happy with my life, and yet still carry this small, persistent feeling that something is missing. Does that make sense?" Nora was quiet for a long moment, her expression carefully composed. "It makes more sense than you might realize," she finally said. "Sometimes the heart remembers things the mind has chosen to forget. It doesn't mean you're not truly happy here, Lyra. It simply means you're human, or wolf, or whatever combination of both we all are, underneath everything else." "Do you think that feeling will ever go away?" Lyra asked. Nora reached over and squeezed Lyra's hand gently. I think some things are meant to be resolved eventually, one way or another. Perhaps that feeling is simply waiting for its moment. Lyra smiled, though she did not fully understand why Nora's words felt oddly reassuring, like a promise she could not remember being made. Neither of them could have known, that very night, in a castle hundreds of miles away, Damon Ashford was staring at a piece of parchment containing a healer's records, the first solid clue in an investigation that would eventually unravel everything he thought he understood about the woman he had once so carelessly rejected. The threads of their story, though separated by distance and forgotten memories, were slowly, inevitably, beginning to pull back together. Caleb Hart placed a stack of papers on Damon's desk, his expression grim in the flickering candlelight of the late evening study. "It took longer than I expected," Caleb said, "but I finally tracked down where Lyra went after leaving the territory. She spent one night at a healer's cottage on the edge of our lands before disappearing entirely from any records I could find." Damon leaned forward, studying the papers with sharp attention. "Whose cottage?" "Elena Whitmore's," Caleb said. "The old healer who used to handle difficult cases the regular pack doctors couldn't manage. She retired from official duties years ago, but apparently still practices privately." "I remember her," Damon said slowly, though the memory felt oddly distant, wrapped in the same strange fog that seemed to cover anything connected to those final weeks before his ceremony with Vivian. Why would Lyra have gone to her? "That's what I intend to find out," Caleb said. "I've arranged a meeting with Elena for tomorrow morning. I thought you should be there." Damon nodded, a strange mixture of anticipation and dread building in his chest. Something about pursuing this investigation felt simultaneously necessary and frightening, though he could not fully articulate why. That night, sleep proved impossible. Damon lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind cycling through fragmented memories of Lyra that felt increasingly significant the more he tried to examine them. Her laugh, the particular way she used to tilt her head when she was thinking carefully about something. The warmth of her hand in his during quiet, stolen moments neither of them had ever properly explained to anyone else. He sat up abruptly, his heart pounding. Why had he never explained those moments to anyone else? The question struck him with unexpected force. He and Lyra had spent years developing what he had always privately considered a deep, meaningful connection, yet he had never once formally acknowledged it, never brought her before the council as a potential mate, never given their relationship the recognition it apparently deserved based on how significant these fragmented memories now felt. Why had he kept it secret? The more Damon tried to recall his reasoning, the more the memory seemed to slip away from him, like grasping at smoke. He remembered feeling certain, at the time, that secrecy was necessary, though the specific justification for that certainty remained frustratingly out of reach. He barely slept that night and arrived at Elena Whitmore's cottage the following morning, heavy-eyed and unusually anxious, Caleb walking silently beside him through the forest path leading to her hidden home. Elena opened her door before they even knocked, as though she had been expecting them. "Alpha King," she said, bowing her head respectfully, though something guarded flickered behind her sharp eyes. "And Caleb Hart. What brings you to my cottage?" "We're looking for information about Lyra Vance," Caleb said directly. "We understand she visited you shortly after leaving the territory." Elena's expression remained carefully neutral, though Damon noticed the slightest tightening around her eyes at the mention of Lyra's name. "Many people visit me," Elena said carefully. "I am a healer, after all." "Please," Damon said, stepping forward, something urgent and desperate creeping into his voice, despite his attempt to remain composed. "I need to know what happened to her. Something feels deeply wrong, and I believe the answer connects somehow to whatever occurred during her visit here." Elena studied him for a long, silent moment, an unreadable expression crossing her weathered face. "Why does it matter to you now, Alpha King? You made your choice regarding Lyra Vance quite publicly, if I recall correctly." The words struck Damon like a physical blow, guilt and confusion tangling together in his chest. "I know I hurt her," he said quietly. "I've known that since the night of the ceremony. But something has felt wrong ever since, like a piece of myself has gone missing, and I cannot shake the feeling that it connects somehow to her." "What kind of wrong?" Elena asked, her voice carefully measured. "My wolf has gone silent," Damon admitted, the confession feeling strange and vulnerable spoken aloud to someone he barely knew. Completely silent, since the night I completed my bond with Vivian Cross. I feel a hollow emptiness that never fades. Dreams I cannot fully remember, but that leave me shaken. And I keep returning, almost helplessly, to specific places that seem to hold some significance I cannot consciously recall. Elena's expression shifted, something complicated passing behind her eyes, though she quickly composed herself before either man could clearly interpret the reaction. That sounds like a difficult burden to carry, Elena said carefully. Please, Damon said again. If you know something about what happened to Lyra, I need you to tell me. I promise you, whatever occurred, I only want to understand the truth. I want to help her, if help is something she needs. Elena remained silent for a long moment, clearly weighing some internal decision. Finally she spoke. I cannot tell you everything, she said. Some truths belong to Lyra alone to share, if she chooses to share them at all. But I will tell you this much. Lyra came to me the night of your ceremony, suffering from a serious condition, connected to a broken bond. Damon's blood went cold. A broken bond? But we never completed a formal bonding ceremony. A mark does not require a formal ceremony to create a genuine bond, Elena said, her voice carrying a weight that made Damon's stomach twist painfully. It simply requires two things. A physical mark, and a sincere emotional connection behind it. Did you ever mark Lyra Vance, Alpha King, even privately, even without formal recognition? The question hung in the air, and Damon felt something inside him crack open, memories suddenly rushing back with startling, painful clarity. The oak tree, the moonlight, Lyra's trembling breath against his skin as he marked her, both of them believing they were beginning a future together, rather than a secret that would eventually devastate her. Yes, Damon whispered, horror creeping through his voice. I marked her, months before the ceremony. I told her the formal announcement would come later, that I needed time to convince the council. And then you rejected her publicly instead, Elena said quietly, without ever revealing the mark already existed. Damon felt the color drain from his face. What does that mean? What happens when someone is publicly rejected after already being secretly marked? Elena's expression grew heavy with old grief. It means the bond turns against the person carrying it. It becomes something dangerous, something that threatens their life, rather than protecting it. Is she all right? Damon demanded, his voice cracking with sudden, desperate fear. Please, tell me Lyra is all right. She is alive, Elena said carefully, choosing her words with obvious deliberation. Beyond that, I am not able to share further details. What I will tell you is this. Whatever choice she made to survive that night came at an enormous personal cost, a cost she alone should have the right to explain, if she ever chooses to. Damon sank into a nearby chair, his legs suddenly unable to support him, the full weight of understanding crashing over him with devastating force. He had marked Lyra, creating a genuine bond between them, then rejected her publicly, without ever acknowledging that bond existed, nearly costing her life in the process. And somehow, whatever she had done to survive that night explained everything happening to him now. The silence of his wolf, the hollow ache in his chest, the fragmented, painful dreams he could never fully remember upon waking. I need to find her, Damon said, his voice thick with emotion. Please, Elena, I need to know where she is. I cannot tell you that, Elena said firmly. Lyra deserves the chance to live her new life, without the past forcing its way back into it uninvited. If she is meant to encounter you again, fate will find a way to bring that about. But I will not be the one who hands you the location of someone who trusted me to help her escape a painful, dangerous situation. Damon wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, but something in Elena's firm, protective expression told him pushing further would accomplish nothing, except damaging whatever fragile trust existed in this conversation. Thank you, he finally said quietly, for telling me this much. And for helping her, whatever that help cost either of you. Elena nodded once, her expression softening slightly. Take care of yourself, Alpha King, and should fate ever bring you back into Lyra's path, I hope you will handle whatever truth you discover, with far more care than you showed the first time. Damon and Caleb walked back toward the castle in heavy silence, the forest path feeling far longer than it had on their journey there. Damon, Caleb finally said, breaking the silence, what are you going to do? Damon stopped walking, staring at nothing in particular, his mind consumed with guilt, fear, and a desperate, aching need to understand the full truth of what he had done. "I'm going to find her," he said quietly, determination hardening in his voice, despite the devastating weight of everything he had just learned. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I need to find Lyra and understand exactly what my mistake cost her." "And Vivian?" Caleb asked carefully. "Your bond with her?" Damon's jaw tightened. "I don't know yet, but I cannot ignore this, Caleb. Not now that I understand even part of the truth. Lyra nearly died because of my choices, and something happened to her that continues affecting both of us even now, months later. I have to find her. I have to make this right, even if I don't yet know how." Caleb placed a steady hand on his friend's shoulder. "Then we'll find her. Together." As they resumed walking, Damon felt something shift inside him. A fragile, painful resolve settling into place, alongside the guilt and confusion still churning through his chest. Whatever Lyra had sacrificed to survive his careless mistake, he was determined to understand it fully, and to find some way, however impossible it currently seemed, to make amends for the devastating harm his choices had caused. He did not yet know how far Hollow Creek was, or how long the search would take, or what exactly he would find once he finally located her. He only knew, with absolute certainty for the first time in months, exactly what he needed to do next. 6 months passed before fate offered Damon the opportunity he had been desperately seeking. The search for Lyra had proven far more difficult than he anticipated. Elena refused to reveal any further details, and without a clear starting point, Caleb's careful investigations turned up nothing beyond confirmation that Lyra had indeed left the region entirely, likely settling somewhere far beyond their kingdom's usual reach. Meanwhile, Damon's condition continued deteriorating in small, painful increments. His temper grew shorter, his patience thinner, his ability to connect with his own wolf remaining permanently, frustratingly absent. Vivian, growing increasingly frustrated with a bond that seemed perpetually incomplete, had begun spending most of her time back in Ironwood territory, their marriage existing more as political arrangement than genuine partnership. The council, sensing their king's growing instability, had grown restless, murmuring quiet concerns about succession and stability that Damon caught wind of despite everyone's careful attempts at discretion. Then, unexpectedly, an opportunity arose. "There's a trade summit happening in 3 weeks," Caleb announced, entering Damon's study with a stack of correspondence. "Several minor territories along the western border are gathering to discuss new agricultural agreements. Hollow Creek is hosting." Damon's head snapped up. Hollow Creek? "A small settlement, mostly independent wolves who've chosen to live outside formal pack structures," Caleb explained. "They've become an important trading hub for herbs and medicinal supplies over the past year or so. The summit organizers specifically requested your attendance, given our kingdom's significant trade influence in the region." "I'll go," Damon said immediately, something electric sparking in his chest at the mere mention of the settlement's name, though he could not have explained why. Caleb studied him carefully. "You don't even know if she's there, Damon." "I know," Damon admitted. "But it's the first genuine lead we've had in months. I have to follow it." The journey to Hollow Creek took nearly a week, traveling through unfamiliar territory that grew increasingly rural and peaceful the further they traveled from Damon's central kingdom. By the time their small diplomatic party arrived at the settlement's outskirts, Damon found himself unable to shake a strange, persistent anticipation building steadily in his chest, growing stronger with each passing mile. Hollow Creek itself proved smaller and more charming than Damon had expected. Wooden buildings with well-tended gardens lining quiet, unpaved streets, the entire settlement carrying an atmosphere of peaceful, unhurried simplicity, entirely different from the political tension of his own castle. The trade summit occupied the settlement's largest meeting hall, various representatives from surrounding territories gathering to discuss agreements over several days of careful negotiation. Damon participated dutifully in the formal proceedings, though his attention remained persistently divided, his eyes scanning every unfamiliar face for any hint of recognition. On the second evening, during a break between negotiation sessions, Damon excused himself from the gathering and walked alone through the settlement's quiet streets, needing air and space to think. He found himself drawn toward the eastern edge of town, following some instinct he could not fully explain, until he arrived at a small wooden building with a modest sign reading Fielding Healing House. Something about the building's presence made his chest tighten with unexplainable significance. Before he could decide whether to approach the door, it opened, and a woman stepped outside carrying a basket of freshly gathered herbs, her attention focused on sorting through the contents rather than noticing him standing nearby. Damon's entire body went rigid. It was Lyra. She looked different than he remembered, her hair longer, her posture carrying a quiet confidence that had not been present during their years together in his kingdom. But her face, the particular shape of her eyes, the familiar way she bit her lower lip while concentrating on a task, all of it struck him with such overwhelming, immediate recognition that he nearly forgot how to breathe. Something deep inside his chest, some dormant, silent presence that had remained frustratingly absent for months, suddenly stirred with violent, unmistakable intensity. His wolf recognized her instantly, surging forward with desperate, aching longing that nearly brought Damon to his knees right there in the street. Lyra looked up, finally noticing him standing several feet away, staring at her with an expression she clearly found strange and unsettling. "Can I help you?" she asked politely, though her tone carried the careful wariness of someone addressing an unfamiliar stranger. Damon opened his mouth, but no words emerged. He simply stared at her, drinking in every familiar detail of her face, his wolf howling internally, with a mixture of joy and devastating grief, that she showed absolutely no sign of recognizing him in return. "Sir?" Lyra asked again, taking a small, cautious step backward, clearly growing uncomfortable under his intense, silent stare. "I'm sorry," Damon finally managed, his voice rough with emotion he struggled desperately to control. "I apologize for staring. You resemble someone I once knew." Something flickered across Lyra's expression, brief and unreadable, gone before Damon could properly interpret it. "That happens sometimes," she said, her tone softening slightly, though her posture remained guarded. "I'm Lyra, by the way. I don't believe we've met." She extended her hand in polite greeting, and Damon stared at it for a long moment before carefully taking it in his own, an electric jolt passing through him at the simple contact, though her expression remained entirely, devastatingly neutral. "Damon," he said quietly, watching her face intently for any hint of recognition at the sound of his name. There was none. Her expression remained politely curious, nothing more, no flicker of memory, no dawning realization, nothing beyond the mild interest one might show toward any unfamiliar visitor. "Are you here for the trade summit?" Lyra asked, apparently satisfied that he posed no threat, her guarded posture relaxing slightly. "Yes," Damon said, forcing himself to maintain some semblance of composure, despite the devastating confirmation unfolding before him. "I'm representing my kingdom's interests." "Well, welcome to Hollow Creek," Lyra said, offering a polite, genuine smile that somehow felt even more painful than if she had shown him hostility. "I hope you enjoy your stay. If you'll excuse me, I need to deliver these herbs before evening." She turned and walked away, her steps light and unhurried, completely unaware that she had just walked past a man whose entire world had permanently shattered, watching her disappear down the street. Damon remained frozen in place long after she had vanished from sight, his chest heaving with barely controlled emotion, his wolf still howling desperately inside him, recognizing its mate, while remaining utterly unable to bridge the devastating gap her forgotten memories had created between them. Elena's words from months earlier suddenly crashed over him with horrifying new clarity. Whatever choice she made to survive that night came at an enormous personal cost. She had forgotten him. Completely, devastatingly forgotten every single moment they had shared together, every promise, every stolen kiss beneath moonlight, every quiet conversation that had once felt like the foundation of an entire future. And somehow, impossibly, he was the cause. Damon returned to his lodgings that night in a state of near total devastation, barely managing to maintain composure through the remainder of the summit's formal proceedings. Caleb noticed immediately that something significant had occurred. "You found her," Caleb said quietly, once they were alone in Damon's temporary quarters. "She doesn't remember me," Damon said, his voice hollow with grief. "Caleb, she looked at me like a complete stranger. She doesn't remember anything, not the oak tree, not the mark, not 2 years of everything we shared together, nothing." Caleb's expression filled with horrified understanding. The ritual Elena mentioned, it must have removed her memories of you entirely. I did this, Damon said, sinking heavily onto the edge of his bed, his head falling into his hands. My rejection nearly killed her, and the only way she survived was by erasing every memory connecting us together. She sacrificed years of her own life, years of genuine happiness we built together, just to survive the damage my careless choice caused. Damon, Caleb said carefully, sitting beside his friend, this isn't entirely your fault. You didn't know the ritual existed. You didn't know rejection after marking could cause such danger. That doesn't matter, Damon said, his voice cracking with raw emotion. I still caused this. I still hurt her so badly that erasing me from her mind became her only path to survival. How am I supposed to live with that knowledge? Caleb remained silent for a long moment, clearly searching for words adequate to the devastating situation. What are you going to do now? He finally asked. Damon lifted his head, his expression hardening with sudden, fierce determination beneath the grief still evident in his eyes. I'm going to earn her trust again. Slowly, carefully, without revealing the full truth until she's ready to hear it. I owe her that much, at minimum. I owe her the chance to know me again, even if she never remembers who I used to be to her. And Vivian? Caleb asked gently, your bond? Damon's jaw tightened. I need to end that arrangement properly, formally, regardless of what happens with Lyra. It was never a true bond, Caleb. My wolf never accepted it, not once, not for a single moment since the ceremony. Continuing to pretend otherwise isn't fair to Vivian either. Caleb nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what his friend was proposing. This won't be simple, Damon. Politically, personally, none of it will be simple. I know, Damon said quietly. But I've spent months feeling hollow and broken, wondering what was wrong with me, when the entire time, the answer was standing right in front of me, living an entirely new life because of the damage I caused. I cannot walk away from that truth now that I understand it. Outside the window, the moon hung full and bright over Hollow Creek's peaceful rooftops, and somewhere across the settlement, Lyra Vance prepared for sleep, entirely unaware that the stranger she had briefly encountered that afternoon was the missing piece of a puzzle her own heart had been quietly searching for, in ways her conscious mind could no longer remember or explain. Neither of them yet understood how difficult, or how necessary, the path ahead of them would prove to be. The trade summit concluded after 5 days, but Damon did not return home with the rest of his diplomatic party. I'm extending my stay, he told Caleb the morning the other delegates prepared to depart. I've arranged to study Hollow Creek's medicinal trade practices more closely, for possible application within our own kingdom's territories. Caleb raised an eyebrow but did not argue. That's a reasonable excuse, convincing, even. It's not entirely an excuse, Damon said. Hollow Creek genuinely does produce remarkable herbal remedies. But you're right that it's also giving me time to figure out how to approach Lyra properly. Just be careful, Caleb warned. Whatever you do, don't rush this. If what Elena told us is true, pushing too hard, too fast, could genuinely frighten her, or worse, somehow trigger complications with whatever remains of that old bond. Damon nodded, understanding the wisdom in his friend's caution, though every instinct in his body screamed at him to run straight to Lyra and explain everything immediately. He forced himself to remain patient, watching Caleb and the rest of the delegation depart, before turning his attention toward the difficult task ahead. His first genuine opportunity arrived 2 days later, when he encountered Nora Fielding at the settlement's small marketplace, examining fresh produce with a critical, experienced eye. You're the visiting alpha from the summit, Nora observed, noticing him nearby. Damon, wasn't it? That's right, Damon said, offering a polite smile. And you must be the healer Lyra mentioned working for. Something sharpened behind Nora's careful expression at the mention of Lyra's name. You've spoken with my apprentice? Briefly, Damon said carefully. She struck me as remarkably skilled, even in our short conversation. I've been considering whether Hollow Creek's healing practices might offer valuable lessons for my own kingdom's medical traditions. Nora studied him for a long, assessing moment, and Damon had the distinct, uncomfortable impression that this woman saw far more than he was currently revealing. Perhaps, Nora said slowly, you should speak with Lyra directly about such matters. She's developed genuine expertise over the past year, and would likely appreciate the opportunity to discuss her work with someone from beyond our small settlement. I would like that, Damon said, careful to keep his voice steady despite the sudden surge of hope building in his chest. If she's willing, of course. I'll mention it to her, Nora said, though something in her tone suggested she already suspected there was considerably more to this visiting alpha's interest than professional curiosity about herbal remedies. True to her word, Nora arranged for Lyra to meet with Damon 2 days later, ostensibly to discuss Hollow Creek's medicinal trade practices for his kingdom's potential benefit. They met at the healing house's small garden, Lyra carrying a basket of tools for tending the various medicinal plants growing throughout the carefully organized rows. Nora mentioned you're interested in learning about our herbal traditions, Lyra said, kneeling beside a row of purple flowering plants, her hands moving with practiced, gentle efficiency as she checked their growth. I am, Damon said, settling nearby, careful to maintain a respectful, comfortable distance. Though I'll admit, part of my curiosity is simply learning more about Hollow Creek itself. It's a fascinating settlement. It is, Lyra agreed, smiling faintly as she continued her work. I've only lived here about a year, but it already feels more like home than anywhere else I've known. Where did you live before? Damon asked carefully, watching her reaction with intense hidden attention. Lyra's hands paused briefly over the plants, a slight furrow appearing between her brows. Honestly, the details are a bit hazy, she admitted. I left my previous pack under difficult circumstances. I don't remember every detail clearly, though I know it wasn't a happy situation. I'm sorry, Damon said, guilt tightening painfully in his chest. That sounds difficult. It's all right, Lyra said, resuming her careful work among the plants. Sometimes I think the mind protects us by softening painful memories. Whatever happened before, I'm grateful for the life I've built here since. Damon watched her carefully, an overwhelming urge building inside him to simply tell her everything, to explain who he truly was, what he had done, what she had sacrificed to survive his careless mistake. But Caleb's warning echoed in his mind, and he forced himself to remain patient, choosing instead to simply enjoy this rare, precious opportunity to speak with her again after months of desperate searching. Tell me about your work here, he said instead, genuine curiosity coloring his voice, despite everything else weighing on his heart. What drew you to healing? Lyra's expression brightened, clearly relieved to discuss something less emotionally complicated. I'm not entirely sure, honestly. When I arrived here, Nora simply offered me an apprenticeship, and something about the work felt immediately right. Like I was meant to help people heal, even if I can't quite explain why that feels so natural to me. Perhaps you always had a caring heart, Damon said softly. Even before circumstances brought you here. Something flickered across Lyra's expression, brief and thoughtful. Maybe, she said quietly. It's strange sometimes. I feel like there are pieces of myself I can't fully access, like reaching for something just beyond my fingertips. But mostly, I feel content with who I am now, regardless of whatever came before. They continued talking for nearly an hour, Lyra explaining various medicinal plants and their uses, while Damon listened with genuine fascination, though his attention remained equally focused on simply absorbing every detail of her presence after so many months of desperate longing. As their conversation naturally drew to a close, Lyra glanced up at him with a curious, slightly puzzled expression. This might sound strange, she said slowly, but talking with you feels oddly comfortable, like we've known each other longer than a few brief conversations. Damon's heart nearly stopped. Does it? He managed carefully. I don't know, Lyra said, shaking her head slightly, clearly, slightly embarrassed by her own observation. Forget I said anything. It's probably nothing. It's not nothing, Damon said gently, unable to fully stop himself. I feel it too. Lyra looked up at him, something uncertain and curious passing across her expression, though she said nothing further, simply offering a small, thoughtful smile before returning her attention to the garden. Over the following weeks, Damon extended his stay in Hollow Creek repeatedly, finding various genuine and semi-genuine reasons to remain in the settlement, rather than returning to his kingdom's political obligations. He and Lyra continued meeting regularly, their conversations growing steadily more comfortable, more natural, a genuine friendship slowly building between them despite the enormous unspoken history hanging invisibly over every interaction. Lyra found herself, without fully understanding why, looking forward to these meetings with an eagerness that surprised her. There was something about Damon's presence that felt deeply, inexplicably reassuring, a sense of safety and familiarity she could not properly explain given how recently they had actually met. "You spend a lot of time with that visiting alpha," Iris observed one afternoon, joining Lyra for their usual walk through the settlement. "I know," Lyra admitted, a small smile tugging at her lips despite herself. "There's just something about him, Iris. I can't quite explain it. It feels like I've known him far longer than these past few weeks." "Do you think it's more than friendship?" Iris asked carefully. Lyra considered the question seriously. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I haven't allowed myself to think of anyone that way since arriving here. But with Damon, it feels different somehow. Safer, maybe. Like something familiar, rather than something new." Meanwhile, back within his own kingdom, whispers had begun circulating regarding Damon's extended, unexplained absence, and Vivian Cross, growing increasingly impatient with a bond she had already privately begun considering a political liability rather than genuine partnership, sent word demanding his immediate return. Damon knew he could not delay the difficult conversation any longer. Whatever future he hoped to build, whatever chance existed of eventually earning back Lyra's trust, and, perhaps someday, her memories, he first needed to properly, formally, end his arrangement with Vivian, regardless of the political complications that decision would inevitably create. He said goodbye to Lyra with a promise to return soon, an ache building in his chest at even this brief, necessary separation, though he took comfort in the genuine warmth he had seen building steadily in her expression throughout their weeks of growing friendship. "I'll be back within a month," he told her, standing at the edge of the settlement where the road stretched out toward his distant kingdom. "I'll look forward to it," Lyra said, and something in her voice, some genuine sincerity beneath the simple words, gave Damon hope that perhaps, despite everything, a path forward truly existed for them, however difficult and uncertain that path remained. As he rode away from Hollow Creek, Damon felt his wolf stirring restlessly within him, no longer entirely silent, as it had been for so many painful months, though still muted, still incomplete, waiting patiently for a reunion that both man and wolf understood, remained frustratingly, achingly out of reach, until the full truth could finally be revealed. The Great Hall felt different this time, when Damon walked through its doors, the same space where he had once rejected Lyra, now serving as the setting for an entirely different kind of difficult announcement. Vivian stood waiting near the throne, arms crossed, her expression carrying a coldness that had grown steadily sharper over the months of their strained, incomplete bond. "You've finally decided to return," she said as he approached, her voice clipped with barely restrained anger. "A month, Damon. You disappeared for an entire month, leaving me to manage both our territory's concerns, while you wandered off to some backwater settlement." "Vivian, we need to talk," Damon said, his tone carrying a seriousness that immediately shifted her expression from anger toward wary suspicion. "About what exactly?" "About us," Damon said carefully. "About this bond, and the fact that it's never truly worked, not from the very beginning." Vivian's jaw tightened. "I'm aware our bond isn't perfect, Damon. Bonds built on political necessity rarely are. But we've managed well enough." "Have we?" Damon asked gently. "Vivian, be honest with yourself. Has this ever felt like a genuine partnership to you? Or has it always felt like exactly what it was? A political arrangement neither of our wolves ever truly accepted." Vivian's composed expression cracked slightly, revealing genuine hurt beneath the careful political mask she typically maintained. "What are you saying, Damon?" "I'm saying I found her," Damon said quietly. "Lyra. I found her, and I understand now exactly why our bond has never worked. My wolf already belonged to someone else before we ever completed our ceremony, someone I wronged terribly, someone I need to make amends with, regardless of the political complications that pursuit creates." For a long, tense moment, Vivian said nothing, her expression cycling rapidly through shock, hurt, and finally, a cold, calculating anger that made Damon's instincts flare with sudden wariness. "You're choosing her," Vivian said flatly. "Over our bond, over the alliance our territories have built, you're choosing to chase after some Omega who apparently doesn't even remember your name. Damon's blood ran cold. How do you know she doesn't remember me? Vivian's expression flickered, a brief moment of surprise quickly masked by renewed anger. I have my own sources, Damon. Did you truly think I wouldn't investigate the strange behavior you've displayed since our ceremony? I know about the ritual. I know she erased her memories of you entirely. Then you understand why I need to make this right, Damon said carefully, watching Vivian's expression with growing concern. I understand that you're a fool, Vivian snapped, chasing after a woman who can never truly return your feelings, because the memories that created those feelings no longer exist within her mind. What exactly do you imagine will happen, Damon? That she'll simply fall in love with you again, memories or not? That everything will magically repair itself once you explain your grand, tragic mistake? I don't know what will happen, Damon admitted honestly, but I know I cannot continue living a lie with you while my wolf remains bonded, however incompletely, to someone else entirely. That isn't fair to either of us, Vivian. Vivian studied him for a long, silent moment, something dangerous simmering behind her carefully controlled expression. Fine, she finally said, her voice deceptively calm. End our bond then. Chase your forgotten Omega across the countryside if that's truly what you want. But understand something, Damon Ashford. Ending this bond will not be simple, politically or personally. My father will not accept this rejection quietly, and neither, I promise you, will I. I understand there will be consequences, Damon said carefully. You understand nothing, Vivian said, her voice suddenly sharp with barely controlled fury. You humiliated an Omega girl for me, remember? Rejected her publicly, before the entire kingdom, to secure our alliance. And now you intend to simply discard that alliance the moment your guilty conscience decides you've found something better? Damon flinched at the accurate, painful accusation, guilt washing through him with renewed intensity. I know how this looks, Vivian. I know the harm my choices have caused, both to you and to Lyra. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm simply telling you that I cannot continue pretending this bond is something it has never genuinely been. Vivian's expression grew coldly calculating. Then let me be equally honest with you, Damon. I will not simply step aside quietly. This alliance matters too greatly to my territory's future for me to allow your personal guilt to unravel it without consequence. If you insist on pursuing this path, expect resistance. Expect complications you have not yet considered. She turned and swept from the hall without waiting for a response, leaving Damon standing alone beneath the same ceiling where, over a year earlier, he had shattered Lyra's world with careless, thoughtless words. Caleb found him there minutes later, his expression grave. That did not sound like it went smoothly. It didn't, Damon admitted. Vivian isn't going to release me easily, Caleb, and I have a terrible feeling her resistance won't remain purely political. What do you mean? Caleb asked, concern sharpening his voice. I mean, Damon said slowly, that Vivian mentioned knowing about Lyra's memory loss. Details I never shared with anyone beyond you and Elena. Someone has been gathering information for her, watching my movements far more closely than I realized. Caleb's expression darkened. If Vivian knows where Lyra is, then Lyra could be in danger, Damon finished, dread building rapidly in his chest. I need to return to Hollow Creek immediately. I need to warn her, and Nora, that Vivian might not simply accept this situation quietly. The formal dissolution of Damon and Vivian's bond required weeks of complicated negotiation between their respective councils, political tensions rising sharply as both territories struggled to understand the sudden, unexpected rupture in their carefully constructed alliance. Vivian's father sent furious correspondence, demanding explanation, threatening various forms of retaliation that Damon's own council scrambled desperately to address. Throughout these tense weeks, Damon remained constantly anxious about Lyra's safety, sending careful, coded messages to Nora through trusted messengers, warning her to remain vigilant, without revealing details that might further endanger the situation, should the messages somehow be intercepted. Nora's responses remained calm and reassuring, confirming that Lyra remained safe and unaware of any looming political complications, though Damon could sense the underlying tension in even these brief, careful exchanges. Finally, after nearly 6 exhausting weeks, the formal dissolution was completed, Vivian returning permanently to Ironwood territory, with icy, unforgiving finality that left Damon uncertain exactly what form her promised resistance might eventually take. He wasted no time returning to Hollow Creek, riding through the night with an urgency that left his escort struggling to maintain pace, his wolf finally stirring with genuine, growing strength as the distance between himself and Lyra steadily decreased. He arrived at the settlement's outskirts just as dawn broke over the horizon, exhausted but driven by an urgent need to see Lyra safe with his own eyes. He found her in the healing house garden, kneeling among her carefully tended plants, exactly as she had been during their very first proper conversation months earlier, and something in his chest finally, fully eased, at the simple, precious sight of her safe and well. Lyra looked up, surprise and genuine warmth lighting her expression at his unexpected return. "Damon," she said, rising quickly to her feet. "You're back early. I wasn't expecting you for at least another week." "I missed you," Damon said honestly, the simple truth of those words carrying weight far beyond what Lyra could currently understand. "And I needed to make sure you were safe." "Safe?" Lyra asked, her brow furrowing with confusion. "Why wouldn't I be safe?" Damon hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal, without properly explaining the full, complicated truth she still did not remember. "There have been some political complications within my kingdom," he said carefully. "I wanted to make sure those complications hadn't somehow reached Hollow Creek." Lyra studied his expression carefully, clearly sensing there was considerably more to his concern than he was currently revealing, though she did not press the matter further. "Well, everything here has been perfectly peaceful," she assured him. "Though I confess, I'm curious what sort of political complications would make you worry about my safety specifically." "It's complicated," Damon said, guilt tightening in his chest at his continued inability to reveal the full truth. "I promise, when the time is right, I'll explain everything properly. For now, please just trust that I have good reason for concern, and be extra cautious of any unfamiliar visitors to the settlement." Lyra's expression grew serious, though she nodded, clearly trusting his judgment, despite her evident confusion. "All right, I trust you, Damon." Those three simple words struck him with unexpected, overwhelming force, an echo of promises made beneath moonlight so long ago. Promises Lyra herself no longer remembered, but that Damon carried within him constantly. A devastating reminder of exactly how much trust he had already once broken, and exactly how carefully he needed to handle rebuilding it properly this time. "Thank you," he said quietly, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "That means more to me than you could possibly know." Neither of them yet realized how quickly Vivian's promised resistance would arrive, or how dramatically it would threaten to shatter the fragile, precious peace they had begun carefully building together in Hollow Creek's quiet, unsuspecting streets. The trouble arrived 8 days later, in the middle of the night, without warning. Lyra woke suddenly, her heart pounding, an instinctive sense of danger prickling along her skin, though she could not immediately identify its source. She sat up in her small bedroom above the healing house, listening carefully to the darkness, and heard it. Footsteps, deliberately quiet, moving somewhere outside her window. She rose carefully, pulling on a robe, and crept toward the window, peering cautiously through the gap in her curtains. Two unfamiliar figures moved through the garden below, their postures alert and purposeful in a way that immediately marked them as intruders rather than simple wanderers. Lyra's breath caught. Whatever instinct had guided her survival through countless unexplained situations over the past year, that same instinct now screamed at her that these strangers meant genuine harm. She moved quickly and quietly, waking Nora in the adjacent room. "Someone's outside," she whispered urgently. "Two people, moving through the garden. I don't think they're here for legitimate reasons." Nora's expression sharpened immediately with alert concern. "Get dressed quickly, and gather anything valuable you can carry easily. We may need to leave in a hurry." As they moved quietly through the house, gathering essential belongings with practiced efficiency, a loud crash sounded from the front door, wood splintering as it was forced open with sudden, violent force. "They're inside," Lyra gasped. Nora grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the back entrance. "We need to reach the town center. There are enough wolves nearby to help defend against whatever this is." They fled through the back door into the cool night air, running through darkened streets, while behind them, they could hear the intruders searching the healing house with increasingly aggressive urgency. Lyra's heart pounded painfully as they ran, fear and confusion tangling together as she struggled to understand who would target them and why. They had nearly reached the town center when a third figure emerged suddenly from a side alley, blocking their path with deliberate, calculated positioning. "Going somewhere?" the stranger asked, his voice carrying cold, professional menace. Nora positioned herself protectively in front of Lyra, her posture shifting into a defensive stance despite her advancing years. "Whatever you're here for, you should leave now, before this becomes far more trouble than it's worth." The stranger simply smiled, unimpressed by the threat, and Lyra realized with growing horror that this confrontation was unlikely to end through simple negotiation. Suddenly, a powerful presence surged into the alley behind them, and Lyra turned to see Damon arriving at a dead run, his expression carrying an intensity and barely restrained fury she had never witnessed from him before. "Get away from her," Damon snarled, his voice carrying an authority and danger that made even the professional attacker take an involuntary step backward. What happened next unfolded in a blur of motion, almost too fast for Lyra to properly track. Damon moved with lethal, controlled precision, quickly subduing the stranger who had blocked their path, while simultaneously shouting urgent warnings toward approaching townspeople, several of whom emerged from nearby buildings, drawn by the commotion, ready to assist against the remaining intruders. Within minutes, all three attackers had been captured, restrained by a combination of Damon's forceful intervention and the collective response of Hollow Creek's alerted residents. Lyra stood trembling in the aftermath, adrenaline still coursing through her system, staring at Damon with a mixture of gratitude and confused, dawning suspicion. "How did you know to come?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "How did you know we were in danger?" Damon's expression carried visible guilt beneath the lingering adrenaline of the confrontation. "I need to explain some things to you," he said quietly. "Things I should have told you much sooner." They gathered in the town hall shortly afterward, Nora, several concerned townspeople, and a still-shaken Lyra listening, as Damon, with Caleb's support, explained the full political situation that had apparently followed them all the way to Hollow Creek's peaceful streets. One of the captured intruders, faced with the united strength of Hollow Creek's defenders and the clear authority of a visiting Alpha King, quickly revealed under careful questioning that they had been sent by Vivian Cross, tasked with locating and forcibly removing the Omega, who had apparently disrupted her political alliance. "She wanted the girl gone," the intruder admitted, clearly recognizing that continued silence would accomplish nothing beneficial for his own situation. Removed from the situation entirely, one way or another, so the king's attention would return properly to matters of state, rather than continuing this pursuit. Lyra listened to this explanation with growing horror and confusion, struggling to understand why a woman she had never met would go to such dangerous lengths regarding a relationship she barely comprehended herself. "Damon," she said carefully, once the immediate crisis had settled and the intruders had been properly secured for eventual transport back to face justice, "I think it's time you explained exactly what's happening here. All of it. Please." Damon looked at her, guilt and love and desperate uncertainty warring visibly across his expression, and finally, after months of careful, patient waiting, understood that the moment for full honesty had unavoidably, urgently arrived. "Can we speak privately?" he asked quietly. Lyra nodded, and together, accompanied silently by Nora and Elena, who had been quietly summoned days earlier by Damon, in anticipation of exactly this eventual necessity, they retreated to the healing house's now repaired sitting room, where Damon finally, carefully, began the difficult task of revealing the entire, devastating truth. "Before I explain," Damon said, his voice unsteady with nervous emotion, "I need you to understand that everything I'm about to tell you comes from genuine remorse and genuine hope that somehow, despite everything, we might find a way forward together." Lyra sat very still, her expression carefully composed, despite the obvious tension building visibly in her posture. "Just tell me, Damon. Whatever it is, I need to understand." Elena stepped forward gently, her weathered face carrying quiet compassion. "Perhaps it would help if I began," she offered. "Lyra, do you remember our very first conversation, the night you arrived in Hollow Creek?" "Of course," Lyra said, confusion evident in her voice. "You told me I had chosen to leave my previous pack, that I had made a brave choice to start fresh." "That was true," Elena said gently. but incomplete. There is considerably more to that story. Truth I could not share with you at the time. Truth that belongs entirely to you to know, should you choose to hear it now. Lyra's hands began trembling slightly in her lap. Please, she said quietly. Tell me everything. And so, carefully, painfully, Elena and Damon together began revealing the truth Lyra had carried unknowingly within her body for over a year, a truth about broken promises, forbidden rituals, and a sacrifice so profound it had reshaped the entire foundation of who she believed herself to be. The revelation took nearly an hour to fully explain, Elena and Damon carefully walking through every detail, from the private marking beneath the oak tree, to the devastating public rejection, to the forbidden ritual Lyra had chosen in order to survive the poison spreading through her body. Lyra listened in near total silence throughout the entire explanation, her expression cycling through shock, disbelief, confusion, and eventually, a quiet, devastating grief that seemed to settle over her like a heavy blanket as the full weight of everything she had lost finally became clear. I was going to die, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, and I chose to forget an entire relationship, years of my own life, rather than face that death. Yes, Elena confirmed gently. And you, Lyra said, turning to face Damon directly, for the first time since the explanation began, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You're the alpha who marked me, then rejected me publicly, nearly killing me in the process. Yes, Damon confirmed, his voice thick with guilt and grief. I am so deeply sorry, Lyra. I didn't understand, at the time, the danger my choice would create. That doesn't excuse what I did, but I need you to know how genuinely, completely sorry I am. Lyra stood abruptly, pacing the small sitting room with agitated, restless energy, clearly struggling to process the enormous weight of everything she had just learned. I don't even know how to feel about this, she said, more to herself than to anyone else in the room. I should be furious with you. I should hate you for what you did. But I don't remember any of it, Damon. I don't remember loving you. Don't remember the pain of your rejection. Don't remember any of the years you're describing. How am I supposed to feel genuine anger towards someone for hurting a version of myself I can no longer access? You don't owe me any particular reaction, Damon said carefully. This is an enormous, overwhelming truth to absorb all at once. Take whatever time you need to process it. Lyra stopped pacing, turning to face him with an expression caught somewhere between vulnerability and building frustration. But that's exactly the problem, isn't it? I don't get the simple relief of hating you properly, the way I likely deserved to before I chose to forget. Instead, I'm left standing here, feeling this strange, inexplicable pull toward you that I've felt since our very first conversation, without fully understanding whether that feeling belongs to some buried remnant of old love, or something entirely new I've built without realizing its connection to a painful history. I don't have easy answers for that, Damon admitted honestly. I wish I did. I wish I could simply explain everything, and have it feel clear and resolved. But the truth is complicated, and I understand if you need space to work through what all of this means for you. Nora stepped forward gently, placing a comforting hand on Lyra's shoulder. Perhaps it would help to remember that whatever you're feeling now, whatever confusion or grief or even affection, all of it is genuinely yours, built from real experiences you've had over this past year, regardless of what came before. You don't have to force clarity immediately. Lyra nodded slowly, taking a shaky breath as she attempted to steady her overwhelmed emotions. I need time, she finally said, looking directly at Damon. I need time to think about everything you've told me, to understand how I genuinely feel, separate from whatever expectations or history exist between us that I can't personally access. Take whatever time you need, Damon said immediately. I won't push you, Lyra. I promise you that. I only ask that you allow me to remain nearby, in case you eventually want to talk further, or ask questions, or simply need support while you process everything. Lyra studied him for a long moment, something complicated and uncertain passing behind her eyes. All right, she finally said quietly. You can stay in Hollow Creek, but please, give me space for now. Damon nodded, understanding and respecting her request, despite the aching desire in his chest to simply hold her close and beg forgiveness for everything he had caused. He left the healing house that evening, finding temporary lodging elsewhere in the settlement, forcing himself to maintain careful distance despite every instinct urging him toward the opposite. The following days proved difficult for everyone involved. Lyra withdrew somewhat from her usual routines, spending long hours alone processing the devastating truth she had just learned, occasionally seeking comfort from Nora or Iris, though she remained largely quiet about the specific details of her internal struggle. Meanwhile, political complications continued unfolding regarding Vivian's failed attempt to have Lyra forcibly removed from the situation. Word had reached various territories about the incident, and Vivian's father, horrified by his daughter's reckless actions, quickly moved to distance his territory from any further conflict, formally severing remaining ties with Daemon's kingdom, while publicly denouncing Vivian's dangerous, unauthorized actions. Vivian herself, facing significant consequences for her role in the failed attack, eventually sent a brief, cold letter to Daemon, acknowledging that pursuing further conflict would accomplish nothing beneficial for either party, effectively ending any lingering threat toward Lyra's safety, though the damage of her attempted interference had already left its mark on everyone involved. With the immediate political danger resolved, Daemon focused his remaining energy on patiently, carefully allowing Lyra the space she had requested, though he found himself unable to fully resist small gestures of continued care, quietly ensuring the healing house's damaged door was properly repaired, arranging for additional security measures throughout the settlement, without drawing unwanted attention to his involvement. Nearly 2 weeks after the devastating revelation, Lyra finally sought him out, finding him sitting alone beneath the very oak tree grove at the settlement's eastern edge that had always mysteriously drawn her comfort during her most difficult, unexplained moments of pain. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, settling onto the ground beside him without waiting for invitation. "About what specifically?" Daemon asked carefully, his heart pounding with nervous hope despite his attempt to remain calm. "About everything," Lyra admitted. "About the fact that this particular grove of trees has always felt strangely significant to me, even though I couldn't explain why, until you told me about the oak tree where you first marked me. About the unexplained pain I've experienced during full moons since arriving here, pain that suddenly makes perfect sense now that I understand its origin. About this persistent, inexplicable pull I've felt toward you since our very first conversation, months before I understood any of the history connecting us." "What are you saying?" Daemon asked softly. Lyra turned to look at him directly, her expression carrying a complicated mixture of vulnerability and quiet determination. "I'm saying that even without my memories, some part of me clearly never fully let go of whatever we once shared. My body remembered, even when my mind couldn't, and I think, despite everything painful about how our history unfolded, I want to understand what it might mean to build something new between us, starting from where we genuinely are now, rather than trying to force a return to memories I may never fully recover." Hope, cautious and fragile, began building steadily in Daemon's chest. "I would like that very much," he said quietly, "but only if you're certain this is genuinely what you want, not simply what you feel obligated toward because of our complicated history." "I'm certain," Lyra said, a small, genuine smile finally breaking through her earlier uncertainty. "I've spent the past 2 weeks examining my own feelings very carefully, Daemon, and what I've discovered is that regardless of forgotten memories or painful history, I genuinely enjoy your company. I feel safe with you, comfortable in ways I don't fully understand, and curious about what future we might build together, if we're both willing to move forward carefully, honestly, and with full acknowledgement of everything that came before." Daemon reached out slowly, giving her ample opportunity to pull away if she chose, and gently took her hand in his own. "Then let's build that future together," he said softly, "one honest, careful step at a time." Lyra smiled, squeezing his hand gently in return, and for the first time since her devastating rejection so many months earlier, Daemon felt his wolf stir with genuine hopeful warmth rather than hollow, persistent grief. They still had much to navigate together, complicated questions about the future, about whether Lyra's memories might ever partially return, about how to properly integrate this reunited relationship into both their lives moving forward. But sitting together beneath the ancient oak trees that had silently witnessed both the beginning and the eventual healing of their complicated story, both Daemon and Lyra felt, for the very first time, in a very long while, genuinely hopeful about whatever came next. Spring arrived in Hollow Creek with unusual gentleness, wildflowers spreading color across the hills surrounding the settlement, the healing house garden bursting with new growth under Lyra's careful, practiced attention. 6 months had passed since the difficult night of full revelation. 6 months during which Damon had gradually, patiently rebuilt something genuine and precious with Lyra, careful never to rush the process, always respectful of the fact that whatever they were building together existed as something new, distinct from the relationship she could no longer consciously remember. Damon had formally relocated significant portions of his kingdom's administrative responsibilities, working closely with Caleb to establish sustainable governance structures that allowed him to spend considerable time in Hollow Creek without abandoning his royal duties entirely. It had not been a simple transition, requiring careful political negotiation and genuine sacrifice, but Damon found the effort entirely worthwhile every time he watched Lyra's face light up with genuine happiness during their now regular time together. On a particularly warm afternoon, Damon found Lyra sitting beneath their familiar oak tree grove, staring thoughtfully at something cradled carefully in her palm. "What's that?" he asked, settling beside her. Lyra opened her hand to reveal a small, smooth stone, unremarkable except for a faint, natural marking across its surface that vaguely resembled an oak leaf. "I found it near the base of this tree yesterday," she said. "Something about it feels significant, though I can't quite explain why." Damon studied the stone carefully, an unexpected wave of emotion building in his chest. "Lyra," he said quietly, "I gave you a stone exactly like this, years ago, the very night I marked you beneath this tree. I told you it represented permanence, strength, something unchanging, despite whatever storms life might bring." Lyra's breath caught, her fingers closing carefully around the stone as though protecting something suddenly, unexpectedly precious. "I don't remember that specifically," she said slowly, "but something about finding it here yesterday made me feel inexplicably emotional, like recognizing something important without fully understanding why." "Perhaps some things remain within us," Damon said softly, "even when conscious memory fails to hold them properly." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching afternoon light filter gently through the oak tree's branches, until Lyra finally spoke again, her voice carrying quiet, thoughtful seriousness. "Damon, I've been thinking about our future," she said, "about what it might mean to properly bond again, this time with full honesty and complete understanding between us, rather than secrets and rushed promises." Damon's heart began pounding. "What are you saying exactly?" Lyra turned to face him directly, her expression carrying genuine warmth and quiet confidence. "I'm saying that over these past months, I've fallen in love with you, Damon. Not the memory of a relationship I can't access, but the genuine person you've shown yourself to be through patient, honest effort. I want to build a proper bond with you, one based entirely on who we both are now, rather than who we once were before everything fell apart." Tears of overwhelming relief and joy sprang to Damon's eyes. "Lyra, are you certain? This is an enormous decision, and I never want you to feel pressured by history you can't fully remember." "I'm certain," Lyra said firmly. "I've never been more certain of anything. I love you, Damon Ashford, entirely as the person I've come to know these past months. Whatever came before matters as history, as important context for understanding our story, but it doesn't diminish the genuine, complete love I feel for you now." Damon reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands, overwhelming emotion making his voice unsteady. "I love you too," he said. "I loved you before, and I love the person you've become, through everything you've endured. I promise you, Lyra, this time, I will never take that love for granted. Never again choose politics or fear over honesty and genuine partnership." They shared a gentle, tender kiss beneath the ancient oak tree, sealing a promise built not on secrets and rushed decisions, but on months of patient honesty, genuine friendship, and carefully rebuilt trust. Their formal bonding ceremony took place several weeks later, not in Damon's grand castle hall where painful history still lingered, but in Hollow Creek's simple town square, surrounded by the community that had become Lyra's true home, alongside Damon's closest, most trusted companions from his kingdom. Nora stood proudly nearby, as Lyra completed her final preparations, adjusting the simple, elegant dress Lyra had chosen for the occasion. "You look radiant," Nora said warmly. "I'm so proud of everything you've built here." and so happy to see you finding genuine happiness." "Thank you for everything," Lyra said, embracing her mentor warmly. "For taking me in, for teaching me, for helping me build a life I could be proud of, even without understanding my full history." "It was my honor," Nora said, her eyes bright with emotion. "Now go. Your future is waiting." Elena had traveled from her distant cottage to witness the ceremony as well, standing quietly near the gathering crowd, watching with evident satisfaction as the difficult, painful choice she had helped facilitate so long ago finally led toward genuine healing and happiness, rather than permanent loss. As Lyra walked toward Damon, beneath a simple arch decorated with wildflowers, she felt none of the fear or uncertainty that had once characterized her original, devastating rejection. Instead, she felt only genuine, complete confidence in the choice she was making, surrounded by a community that had witnessed and supported her entire journey toward this moment. Damon watched her approach with tears openly streaming down his face, unashamed of the emotion overwhelming him after everything they had endured to reach this precious, hard-won moment together. "I promise to honor you completely," Damon said, once Lyra stood before him, taking both her hands gently in his own. "To never again choose fear or political convenience over honesty and genuine partnership. To spend every day earning the trust you've so generously extended toward me, despite everything that came before. I promise to build our future together with complete honesty," Lyra replied, her voice steady and warm with genuine love. "To embrace whatever comes next, memories or not, with courage and openness. To love you fully, as the person you've shown yourself to be through patient, genuine effort." As they completed their bond beneath the warm afternoon sun, surrounded by cheering friends and neighbors, Damon felt his wolf finally, completely settle into peaceful, genuine contentment, for the first time in over a year, the hollow emptiness that had plagued him since his devastating mistake finally, fully healed. Lyra, for her part, felt something equally profound settle within her own heart, a sense of wholeness and rightness that transcended whatever specific memories remained locked away beyond her conscious reach. That evening, as celebrations continued throughout Hollow Creek's town square, Damon and Lyra slipped away briefly to their familiar oak tree grove, watching the first stars emerge across the darkening sky. "Do you ever wonder," Lyra asked quietly, resting her head against Damon's shoulder, "what our life might have looked like if none of this difficulty had ever happened? If you had simply chosen me from the very beginning, honestly and without secrecy?" Damon considered the question carefully before answering. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but honestly, Lyra, I think our story, however painful parts of it were, has led us towards something even more precious than what we might have built otherwise. This love, the one we've built together over these past months, exists entirely because of genuine choice, complete honesty, and hard-won trust. I wouldn't trade that foundation for an easier path that might never have taught us these deeper lessons." Lyra smiled, considering his words carefully. "I think you're right," she said softly. "Our story wasn't simple or painless, but it brought us here, to this moment, stronger and more honest than we might have ever become otherwise." They sat together beneath the stars, hand in hand, hearts finally at peace, after such a long, difficult journey, toward genuine love and understanding. Whatever challenges their future together might bring, they faced them now as true partners, bonded not merely by an old, broken promise beneath ancient branches, but by months of patient honesty, genuine friendship, and the hard-won trust that had ultimately proven far stronger than any memory could have provided alone. And somewhere within Lyra's heart, though she could not fully explain why, she felt a quiet, persistent certainty that whatever memories remained lost to her conscious mind, the love she now shared with Damon was, in every way that truly mattered, complete.